after discovering my brother's secret. I was in complete shock. I berated him in frustration. With a height of 188 cm, broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and long legs, you've got all the best conditions. How did you end up as the bottom? Usually aloof and dignified, he smiled like a sly fox. Seeing isn't always believing. Maybe you should take another look. On March 23, 2024, at exactly 9 p.m., I confirmed that my brother likes men, and he's the one on the bottom. 2 minutes ago, I witnessed a scene I'll never forget. Reginald Elliott, with his hair in disarray, was pinned under a man. His shirt had 2 buttons popped off. His tie was crumpled and tossed aside. I stood there awkwardly, wishing I could gouge out my eyes. Reginald Elliott kicked Miles Dorothea away and scrambled to get up, trying to explain. Maggie, it's a misunderstanding. It's not what you think. In my mind, Reginald Elliott was always incredibly calm. According to Miles Dorothea, he could stay steady even if the sky were falling, but seeing him so flustered now was a first. When I caught sight of the red marks on his collarbone, I was stunned. Miles Dorothea dusted himself off, skillfully wrapping his arms around Reginald Elliott's waist while his gaze stayed on me. Maggie, I didn't expect you to find out about it so soon. I didn't want to, but your brother smells so good that I couldn't control myself. Me? Is that something you can actually say? I don't understand the world of gay men. Reginald Elliott is 3 years older than me and is my nominal older brother. When I was 7, my dad brought a child from the orphanage. Handsome, delicate, and refined, definitely a handsome kid. My dad, smiling, affectionately rubbed Reginald Elliott's head and said, Maggie, Reginald is part of our family now, so you mustn't bully him. According to my dad, Reginald Elliott's parents died in a fire. By the time the ambulance arrived, they were already gone. All he saw were 2 charred skeletons. For a 10-year-old, it was a silent torture. So, for a long time, Reginald Elliott didn't want to get close to anyone. It wasn't until he grew older that the shadows of his childhood began to fade. I always thought that with his personality, he would be inclined to like passionate and beautiful girls. I never expected that he'd end up with Miles Dorothea. Reginald Elliott and Miles Dorothea have known each other for 8 years. If they're really together, I can't even imagine it. Just closing my eyes, I can picture Reginald Elliott with him holding his waist, slowly thrusting, and trembling slightly. A month ago, my dad specifically advised Reginald Elliott to focus not just on work, but also on finding a life partner. Now, with that concern laid to rest, I quickly left after dropping off the car keys. My dad was on a business trip in Europe. Before leaving, he had me pick out a new car as a birthday gift for Reginald's 23rd birthday. Who knew I'd stumble upon this explosive scene? As soon as I entered the elevator, Miles Dorothea's pig-like screams echoed through the building. I shook my head. They were really going all out. The elevator dinged open, and Reginald Elliott appeared in a perfectly tailored suit. He looked the exact opposite of his earlier disheveled state. After a moment of consideration, I felt I needed to voice my frustration. I glared at him and scolded. With a height of 188 cm, broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and long legs, what a great setup. And yet you ended up being the bottom. By the end, Reginald Elliott's face shifted from sunny to cloudy. In the confined space, he had a big smile on his lips as he advanced on me. When there was nowhere left to retreat, he stopped. I didn't expect Maggie to understand me so well. Usually, I'm used to seeing the calm and collected Reginald Elliott. Now, he was just inches away from me. If he moved slightly forward, I'd be able to feel his breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that his look at me was different now. When we exited the elevator, Reginald Elliott offered to take me back to school. I coldly refused. No need. On the way, an unexpected car accident left me with a head injury. After being discharged, I forgot everyone except for Reginald Elliott. More precisely, I remembered him as my boyfriend. As a college student with 0 dating experience, my amnesia made me clear-headed about nothing but him. I followed him around, clinging to him and calling him brother. Every morning, I would sneak into Reginald Elliott's bedroom and crawl into his bed. At first, he'd shy away, pulling me out. Later, he learned to lock the door. To guard against me. I was determined not to let this youthful heart slip away. Every night before bed, Reginald Elliott would take a shower. It was a big habit of his. The night was endless, and the bathroom was filled with steam. I changed into a deep V-neck slip and quietly pushed the door open. The sound of water suddenly stopped. Through the fogged glass, his beautiful body was partially visible. And fortunately, Reginald Elliott noticed my sneaky silhouette. Maggie Flynn. Caught red-handed during my first attempt at spying, I was devastated. I pretended to be dead, murmuring "Anaha." When I turned, Reginald Elliott had already quickly put on a bathrobe. Maggie Flynn, you have a leg injury. How did you get in here? What if you slipped? Since my discharge, I'd often lied to Reginald Elliott about my leg hurting. Every time, He'd stop everything he was doing and carefully massage my legs. This time was no different. He picked me up horizontally and laid me on the soft couch. When he turned to get the ointment, I grabbed the belt of his bathrobe. Brother. The loose white belt fell away effortlessly with a tug. Reginald Elliot frowned, his throat moving involuntarily, but he still wouldn't meet my gaze directly. Maggie Flynn, stop this. As he turned his back, I, barefoot, stepped onto the cold floor and wrapped my arms around his waist from behind. The bathrobe, newly tied, was quickly undone by me without the barrier of fabric. The heat of our skin-to-skin contact surged to my forehead. Even though I couldn't see, the sensation through my fingers told me that Reginald Elliot had a great body. Listening to his increasingly heavy breathing, I became bolder, my fingers probing downwards. The warmth of his abdomen made my fingers tingle. Reginald Elliot suddenly stopped my hands. Maggie Flynn, stop this. You need to rest. I pouted in disappointment and murmured, brother, don't you like me anymore? I'm your girlfriend. Can't I even look? Reginald Elliot was silent, but his rapid heartbeat betrayed his unease. I stood on tiptoe and bit his neck slightly. Brother, don't you like me like this? In an instant, Reginald Elliot pulled me down onto the couch. The usually aloof and dignified man had his ears turning red like they were about to bleed. The bathrobe was half off, barely covering his lower body, exposing a large part of his chest. Drops of cold water from his hair fell onto my face, and memory suddenly surged. I was stunned, my legs trembling. Reginald. Along with the memories came a late-blooming sense of shame. I, Maggie Flynn, the daughter of the Flynn group, had boldly removed my brother's bathrobe. Although there was no blood relation, I still felt like a hooligan. Our eyes met, leaving only awkwardness. After a moment, Reginald Elliot spoke first. Maggie, you were shaking quite a bit earlier. Me. You were breathing even harder. As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized I misunderstood him. He was referring to the shaking of my hands when I pretended to casually pull the bathrobe back up from his waist. Turns out, hitting my head had affected my intelligence. Remembering those sweet brother calls, I shuddered. From the day my dad adopted Reginald Elliot, I had never called him brother. A car accident had somehow triggered this hidden side of me. During my amnesia, I had been all over Reginald Elliot, even sleeping clinging to him. Gritting my teeth, I gave him a fierce warning. Don't you dare tell Dad about this embarrassing stuff. The man before me was casually lounging, supporting his chin with one hand. Drops of water from his hair rolled down his chin and into his bathrobe. Brother hasn't had a relationship yet, and you've seen him all exposed. Reginald Elliot ruffled my hair, still smiling. Maggie Flynn, you need to be responsible for me. Damn it, I scoffed, forcing a smile. If you're not gay, I'll find you a well-endowed man. The room fell into silence. Reginald Elliot stared at me intently, like he was eyeing his prey. I felt uncomfortable under his gaze and tried to run, but Reginald Elliot was faster. His long arms encircled my waist, and his cool, deep voice came from above. Maggie, stop talking about finding me a man. I only want you for the rest of my life. I suspected Reginald Elliot had been possessed. Before the accident, he was a cold workaholic, aloof and abstinent, but now, he seemed more like a peacock in full display. A person who hadn't updated his Twitter in years, had posted 3 sets of abs photos in a week, all visible only to me. Influenced by him, I had been having spring dreams for 3 consecutive days, different times, scenes, and positions. The only constant was Reginald Elliot. To change this awkward situation, I decided to watch a few episodes of crime shows. At midnight, amid horrifying music, I fell asleep in a half-dream, half-awake state. I seemed to be lying in a pool. I couldn't move my body. Behind me was the cold, hard pool wall, and in front of me was a naked body. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was also completely naked. Moments later, he leaned his head on my shoulder, breathing heavily. Maggie, it really likes you. The sky was clear, the water sparkling, and lay back with my hands casually resting behind me. The scene shifted, seeming to return to the bedroom. Reginald Elliot's deep, sensual voice whispered, Maggie, raise your legs a bit. A jolt of thunder pulled me out of the dreamy haze. Opening my eyes, I met Reginald Elliot's amused gaze. For the past few days, I'd been intentionally avoiding him. I didn't expect to run into such an awkward situation upon meeting. The computer screen was a blinding white, cutting through the darkness. The rain pounded on the windows, which were rattling. The next second, a bloody face appeared on the window. I jumped, closing the computer with lingering fear. Reginald Elliot lowered his head and gave a slight smile as he handed me a glass of warm water. Still into this at your age? His clear and gentle voice immediately reached my ears. I looked down and saw his fingers, slender and well-defined, holding the glass. Just moments ago, those same fingers had been resting on my waist, teasing me freely. I nervously looked away, my cheeks flushing red, which caught Reginald Elliot's attention. Without hesitation, he placed his hand on my forehead, his face showing concern. Maggie, you're very red. Are you running a fever? I Reminded of those embarrassing dreams, blurted out, "Isn't it because of you?" Reginald Elliot was momentarily stunned, then his lips curled into a sly smile. "So, Maggie had a dream about me." Caught off guard, I quickly denied it. "No way. Stop being so self-centered." Reginald Elliot nodded, suddenly moving closer to me. He looked like he had been up all night, with faint dark circles under his eyes, giving him a worn-out but oddly attractive look. My face flushed again as I thought about it. I quietly opened the unsolved murder case on my computer. After a while, I noticed Reginald Elliot's steady breathing. He was asleep, leaning against the sofa, his eyes closed. I quickly switched the screen on my computer and typed a question in the search box. What to do if you accidentally see a man naked? A reply from an online user read, "You should take responsibility." I stared blankly at those 6 words, then looked over at Reginald Elliot. He was wearing a black shirt, with the top 2 buttons undone. His naturally pale skin contrasted sharply with the dark shirt, giving him a mix of restraint and allure. I hesitated, fearing I might have to dream about him again. Tentatively, I nudged his shoulder. "Reginald, wake up. Don't sleep here." He seemed extremely tired and didn't react to my words. Only when I gently pinched his ear did he slowly awaken. Reginald Elliot groggily opened his eyes a crack, still not fully alert. After a moment, he leaned in and kissed me. The faint scent of snow would fill my mouth, and all my chaotic thoughts stopped. Perhaps it was the suddenness, but I even forgot to push him away. Reginald Elliot took full advantage. If the first kiss had been tender and lingering, this one was like a storm, intense and unrestrained. If things progressed further, it might really lead to trouble. In my desperation, I bit Reginald Elliot. The smell of blood spread out. He pulled back, looking disoriented and embarrassed. "Maggie." The man, who usually handled business with ease, now stumbled over his words, unable to complete a sentence. His face showed a mix of guilt and frustration. Seeing the blood on his lips, I frowned. I had bitten him quite hard. Reginald Elliot pressed his lips together, unable to look at me. He muttered, "Maggie, I'm sorry." My thoughts drifted back to when we first moved in together. Reginald Elliot had been just as cautious and apologetic back then. He rarely spoke but would constantly apologize. When he accidentally broke a fruit bowl, he turned pale and kept saying sorry, even though it wasn't valuable. In high school, when a few troublemakers falsely accused him of stealing, he stood before my father, practically begging, "Merlin, I'm not a thief. Please believe me." Orphan and living under someone else's roof, such experiences made him extremely sensitive. In recent years, Reginald Elliot made friends who were once skeptical and mocked him for relying on my father's help to become a general manager. But over time, his work skills won them over. Yet, I now realize he still seems as insecure as before. His usually bright eyes were now clouded with moisture. I pretended to be casual and waved my hand dismissively. "I'm generous and won't hold it against you. Just consider it as you being groggy from sleep. But if this happens again, I'll definitely punch you." Reginald Elliot's gloom faded as he forced a smile. "All right, you have the final say." I sighed in relief and prepared to go back to my room to sleep. It was already 2 a.m., and if I stayed up longer, I'd end up with panda eyes like Reginald Elliot. As I reached the last stair, he suddenly called out to me, "Maggie, can you not avoid me?" My heart felt a pang of pain. Reginald Elliot looked at my back, his voice pleading, "Please, don't avoid me." That night, I didn't have any more of those absurd dreams. Instead, my thoughts kept drifting back to the past. In my freshman year, Reginald Elliot had already been accepted to the prestigious MIT as an outstanding graduate. He was invited back to give a speech to us new students. On that day, someone gave me a love letter and even confessed in the school's broadcasting room, causing quite a stir among classmates. How romantic. "Say yes to him," they cheered. In the midst of the excitement, I felt only irritation. Someone pushed me, causing me to fall into a male classmate's arms. Reginald Elliot arrived just then and saw this. Under the blazing sun, he pushed through the crowd, approaching me. The boy who had been boasting now lay on the ground, knocked down by Reginald Elliot's punch. Reginald Elliot glared at him, his arm tense with veins bulging. "Who do you think you are, to dare touch her?" The surrounding students fell silent, and he led me away. Someone whispered, "What's he so proud of? He's just an orphan." Thinking he's some big shot, Reginald Elliot's body stiffened. I gently called his name and held his cool hand. That day, he remained silent, his face grim. When I brought a bouquet of sunflowers, he finally looked up, tears in his eyes. "Maggie, I can hardly remember what my parents look like anymore." He laughed bitterly. "Do you think I'm a failure? Maybe my life was always meant to be unnecessary." I shook my head firmly. "At least, every day since meeting you, I've been happy and grateful. That accident wasn't your fault." I'm not one to offer comfort often, but that night, we talked all night. Later, as I watched his tear-streaked eyes, I kissed him impulsively. "Reginald, you're not a failure. You're the only person I want to keep." Morning came, and half the pillow was soaped. I looked at my swollen eyes in the mirror and applied a light makeup to hide my exhaustion. Reginald Elliot had gone to work early, remembering the bite mark left on his lips yesterday. I felt a pang of guilt. I bought some ointment and decided to deliver it personally. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. I waited for a long time in his office, but didn't see him. I idly scrolled through my phone and noticed a photo frame. At first glance, it seemed to be a group photo of Reginald Elliot and his colleagues, nothing special. But when I opened it, I found a photo of myself inside, with a date written on the back, December 31st, 2018. Thinking back, it didn't seem significant, just a New Year's Eve. Nothing out of the ordinary. I put the frame back and, as I was crouching down, the door opened. Reginald Elliot's voice reached my ears. Hey. On the other end, Miles Dorothea was shouting loudly. Reginald, why are you so useless? You've been in love with her for 6 or 7 years and are still single. I've never seen anyone as pathetic as you. It's a waste of that face. Reginald Elliot sighed, pressing his forehead, his voice carrying a rare hint of helplessness. I'm afraid if I pursue her too aggressively, she'll hate me. Recently, she's been avoiding me. My heart skipped a beat. Miles Dorothea continued, since you don't have any blood ties, just go for it. Maggie is beautiful and kind. If you charm her, maybe she'll accept you, you awkward and creepy brother of hers. I was squatting on the floor, my legs starting to go numb. The sudden ringtone of my phone forced me to stand up and face Reginald Elliot. He looked at me with surprise, confusion, and a hint of embarrassment. I weakly explained, I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I just needed to find you. Miles Dorothea, with excellent hearing, caught my voice. Reginald, who's the girl you're talking to? I heard you. You're only interested in Maggie, right? Be generous and introduce her to me. Reginald Elliot, expressionless, told him, go away. Before Miles Dorothea could explode in a fit of rage, Reginald Elliot quickly hung up. We stared at each other in silence. Finally, Reginald Elliot looked away first, focusing on the medicine box on the desk. Did you bring this for me? He asked. My attention was on the lower part of his face. The wound, after a night, was no longer so shocking, but left a mark that sparked imagination. Today, when I arrived at the office, several female employees were excitedly discussing, Reginald is definitely in a relationship. During the meeting earlier, I noticed it. That scar is clearly from a bite. I wonder what kind of girl Reginald is dating. She must be something else. I felt extremely embarrassed hearing their discussion. Yet, Reginald Elliot seemed completely oblivious. He didn't try to hide the mark, putting it on display for everyone to speculate about. I glared at him and pointed to the nearby chair. Sit down. He complied without protest, obediently looking up as I took care of him. Outside, the sunlight was warm and gentle, casting a glow on his tousled, soft hair. In internet terms, he had the puppy dog vibe, with an aura of sweet, milky scent. I struggled to hold back my laughter as I dabbed at his lip with a cotton swab. Throughout, Reginald Elliot watched me intently, as if willing me to burn a hole through him with my gaze. Before leaving, I meticulously reminded him, remember, take this medicine 3 times a day. He responded with a shy, lovesick look. Next time, will you help me again? Seeing the hopeful look in his eyes, I crushed his fantasy without hesitation. In your dreams, this time there was a special favor. There won't be a next time. Reginald Elliot, with a hint of regret but a pleased smile, nodded. He instinctively reached out as if to touch the top of my head, but I anticipated his move, smoothly turning away and making a face at him. Miles said you're a creep, so I should stay away from you. Reginald Elliot seemed in great spirits, his earlier gloom entirely lifted. As long as you're willing to talk to me, I'm fine with anything. Since the accident, I have been lounging at home, having missed nearly 2 months of school. My teacher, growing impatient, urged me, come back to class as soon as you're healed, or you won't get any credits for all these absences. The day after receiving the message, I trudged over to MIT with a sense of resignation. Back in the day, Reginald Elliot had entered MIT as the top student and, combined with his troublemaker looks, had made quite a name for himself. Even after graduation, tales of him lingered in the school. I didn't expect to run into him again so soon. On stage, he stood tall and elegant, addressing the audience. It's an honor to return to my alma mater. I'm especially grateful to all the students here, who sacrificed their time to listen to this 2-hour lecture. Under the spotlight, Reginald Elliot spoke eloquently, his every gesture exuding grace and sophistication. As he was leaving, a crowd of adoring fans surrounded him, with one girl asking, "Senior, you're amazing. Will you accept my flowers?" Reginald Elliot politely declined. Thank you, but unfortunately, I'm allergic to flowers. Quite the straightforward liar. The girl hesitated but then asked, Senior, do you have someone you like? He turned his head, his gaze effortlessly finding me among the crowd. Yes, but she doesn't quite like me. The crowd gasped in surprise. No way. Even Senior can't get someone. Reginald Elliot shrugged and leaped down the steps, heading straight towards me. My roommate Phoebe Bloom gasped, pushing me. Oh my gosh, he's so handsome. There are actually men this good looking. Is he looking at us? I pretended to stay calm, shaking my head firmly. No. More and more curious eyes turned toward us. Just as Reginald Elliot was about to call my name, I stood up quickly, lowered my hat, and tried to confuse Phoebe Bloom out in a hurry. When I received a call, Phoebe Bloom had taken me to the gym to watch her crush play basketball. Reginald Elliot's voice came through the phone with a hint of melancholy. Maggie, you're still avoiding me? Before I could offer any comfort, a boy in a white jersey placed his hands on his knees and looked me in the eye, smiling. Hey, girl, which department are you from? When I didn't answer, he continued without awkwardness. You're really pretty. Phoebe Bloom, grinning widely, introduced me. Sophomore, journalism, Maggie Flynn. The boy gave her a grateful look, then winked at me. Maggie, if I win this game, can I have your contact information? I restrained the eager Phoebe Bloom and gently declined. What if you lose? The boy smiled confidently. I won't lose. Watch me. I'll definitely win. The call had gone silent, but it hadn't ended. Hesitantly, I asked, are you still there? After a pause, Reginald Elliot responded solemnly. I'm here. I scratched my head and explained. The person just now, I don't know him. Don't get any wrong ideas. He seemed to relax a bit, his tone becoming lighter. Okay, I understand. I scoffed. With his awkward personality, it was no surprise he needed everything spelled out. After ending the call, I looked back at the basketball game with some relief. Phoebe Bloom kept chatting away. The guy who hit on you, did you see his name on his jersey? I scanned the field and nodded. Phoebe Bloom continued. That's Hugh Ford, a freshman who just joined the basketball team. His, skills are quite impressive. As I looked up, Hugh Ford made a beautiful three-point shot, and the applause from the audience was relentless. Just as she said, Hugh Ford's team won. Taking advantage of the break, I quietly slipped out of the gym. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I thought it was Phoebe Bloom, lost in her crush. Turning around, I was met with Hugh Ford's bright, intense eyes. You forgot to give me your contact information. Hugh Ford approached me confidently, and even grabbed my hand without permission. Looking hurt. Why did you run off? You're not keeping your word. Seriously, are all younger guys so clingy these days? I looked at Hugh Ford silently. After a vigorous game, his forehead was covered in a thin layer of sweat. His aggressive eyes remained fixed on me, and I've always disliked that kind of possessive gaze. So, I responded coldly. I don't recall making any promises to you. In my peripheral vision, I seemed to catch a glimpse of Reginald Elliot's shadow. It vanished in an instant, as if it was just a figment of my imagination. Since leaving the auditorium, Reginald Elliot had contacted me. He silently faded from my life. During this time, an unexpected visitor appeared. He managed to coincide with me wherever I went. Initially, Hugh Ford didn't do anything outrageous, but one night, a sign full of explicit love messages appeared downstairs, featuring my photo, arranged with heart-shaped roses, attracting a lot of attention. Hugh Ford, with his self-proclaimed deep feelings, played a guitar badly, lacking any musical theory knowledge, his raspy voice making it even worse. After one song, he shouted, Maggie Flynn from journalism, I like you. The scene was chaotic, with people surrounding the area. As the person involved, I had no choice but to show up. At the very least, the farce needed to end. I had never felt so uneasy in my 20 years of life. When Hugh Ford saw me, he rushed over and hugged me. I missed you so much. It hurts everywhere. Laughter echoed through the crowd. I gripped my wrist tightly to stay rational and said, Go back and clean this up. We'll handle this privately. He stubbornly shook his head. Don't say that. You know I can't handle your rejection. In front of everyone, Hugh Ford firmly held my hand, placing it on his chest. Feel it. It's beating for you. My patience was running thin. The last straw was when Hugh Ford, catching me off guard, touched my waist. The remaining thread of my patience snapped cleanly. After a moment of shock, I delivered a resounding slap to him. The absurd confession farce came to an end. I became a well-known figure at MIT. A week later, I began receiving anonymous packages, cockroaches, snake skins, dead mice, each package different from the last. At first, I didn't pay much attention, thinking it was just childish pranks. But then, the sender sent a photo of my late mother. That night, I developed a high fever and was rushed to the emergency room. In my hazy state, I couldn't see clearly, but heard a familiar, comforting voice. Maggie, I'm here. On the day I was discharged, my roommate Phoebe Bloom gave me shocking news. The person sending the threatening packages was Hugh Ford. Upon receiving the photo, I reported it to the police. This wasn't too surprising. It was normal for someone to bear a grudge after being publicly humiliated and slapped. However, Huford's messy private life was exposed on the campus forum. He was known for being promiscuous in high school, especially targeting pretty girls from good families. Oh, and he's into guys too. Such scum. Who knows what diseases he might have. Phoebe Boom shook her head in disgust. You can't judge a person by their appearance. Overnight, Huford became a pariah. The last time I saw him was in the school principal's office with his disgraceful behavior exposed. The school's reputation was damaged, and Huford was forced to withdraw. Back then, he was radiant and outstanding. Now, he was barely recognizable, covered in bruises. As we passed each other, his eyes burned with hatred, and he clenched his teeth, threatening, "Just wait." Time flew by. 2 months passed in a flash. My life remained calm and unchanged. Huford's threats slowly faded from memory. But little did I know, rats in the gutter are experts at lurking and waiting. The day my dad's plane landed, he specifically asked Reginald Elliott to pick me up from school. His exact words were, "After being away on a business trip for so long, it's time for a family reunion dinner." It was during this time that the unexpected happened. The moment Reginald Elliott opened the car door for me, Huford burst out with a knife. He must have been watching for a long time to choose this perfect moment. By the time I saw his menacing face, it was too late. Reginald Elliott was stabbed in the back. The sound of tearing clothes and the gush of blood fell simultaneously. Huford laughed maniacally. "You were so bold when you hired someone to beat me up. Come on. Ha ha ha." Losing too much blood, Reginald Elliott collapsed on one knee. But when I saw Huford's knife turning toward me, he desperately shielded me from harm. Even in his final moments of consciousness, he weakly mouthed, "Run." The ambulance arrived quickly. Reginald Elliott, covered in blood, was carried away on a stretcher. Watching him being taken to the ICU, my heart was gripped with a chilling sense of dread. Thanks to his desperate protection, I was safe and unharmed. I never imagined I would find myself in such a helpless situation. I never expected that, when I was at my lowest, someone would be willing to trade their life for mine to give me a chance. That person was my older brother for 13 years. He had a past he would rather not revisit, and a painful memory he preferred to keep hidden. He was cold, reclusive, and not very talkative, but he was also warm, cheerful, and full of laughter. Every little moment is etched deeply in my memory. At 16, I kissed the corner of his eye. At 20, he planted a dandelion in my heart. The long-buried feelings and emotions surged forth at that moment. Huford was sentenced to prison for intentional harm. I kept vigil by Reginald Elliott's bedside every day, hoping he would wake up. I wanted to ask him why the date on the photo was December 31st, 2018. Eventually, I got my answer. December 31st, 2024. Through the long night and endless fireworks, I lay on Reginald Elliott's shoulder and asked him, "What do you want for the new year?" He chuckled softly and pinched my earlobe. His warm breath made me shiver. "I suppose it's time to start dating." I seriously cupped his face and gave him a gentle kiss. "Congratulations on your successful wish, my boyfriend."
I was pulled from the rubble by firefighters. That year, I was 10 years old. At an age full of carefree spirit, I became an orphan. Having lost both my parents, I was kicked around and finally thrown into an orphanage. Just days before, I had called them uncle and aunt. In the unfamiliar environment, whenever I closed my eyes, I saw the bodies covered by white sheets, which couldn't even be called corpses. My parents had died in a fire, and I, both a survivor and an abandoned shell. I didn't like talking to people. I spent my days huddled in a cold corner, fantasizing about death taking me away. Because I was so reclusive, no one paid me any attention. The director often hoped for a kind soul to adopt me. Unfortunately, apart from the kind Merlin, no one else even bothered to ask my name. Merlin took me home. He said he had a daughter named Maggie Flynn. From now on, I would be Maggie's brother. Living in someone else's home wasn't as bad as I had imagined. When I accidentally knocked over a fruit bowl, I nervously apologized over and over again. Merlin didn't scold me. He just looked at me with eyes full of pity. I hadn't seen such a look since my parents had passed away. An inexplicable warmth surged in my heart. Merlin ran a large company. Often, he was busy with work. In the large villa, only my sister and I were left. When I first met my sister, I was worried she might misunderstand and think I had taken away the fatherly love that was rightfully hers. Merlin had told me that 2 months ago, their mother had passed away. Like me, she had lost her mother forever. This kind of pain was like a poison that had seeped into the bones, occasionally flaring up but always remaining in the body. It couldn't be expelled or resolved. It could only be eased by clinging to the little bits of happiness in my memory. My sister often wiped away tears in secret. Later, I started drawing her symbols from comics, symbols for happiness, safety, and not crying. Although my writing was ugly, it finally made her less sad. I once thought I would always be a good older brother. Merlin had saved my life, and I should take good care of my sister in return. But somehow, I had other feelings inside. On New Year's Eve when I was 17, it was snowing heavily outside. My sister drew a cute dot on my face. This was a game we used to play, rolling dice to see who won. The winner could draw on the loser's face and hands. The light brush strokes and rhythmic breathing made my heart flutter. I vaguely felt that I might become someone who had inappropriate feelings for my sister in the future. Over more than 10 years of close companionship, my obsession grew deeper. Maggie's likes and dislikes were ingrained in me through daily exposure. I played the role of the caring older brother, while secretly yearning for a deeper bond with her. Every time I thought about it, I was relieved that Maggie never called me brother. In my freshman year of college, Maggie kissed me for the first time, even though it was just the corner of my eye, and she might have done it out of sympathy. I was overjoyed. Seeing her close to others made me secretly jealous. I wanted to shed this identity and confess my feelings to her right away. The repeated joy and disappointment intertwined. Everything about Maggie affected me deeply. At the moment, I protected her from harm. I had a brief moment of fear what if I had died then. Fortunately, when I woke up, she was still by my side. Fireworks in the night sky. No brilliance could compare to her knowing smile. This story has concluded. Feel free to subscribe to our channel for the latest content, with a large number of novels updated daily.